Hello and welcome to Kinsei-Do Corner. Have you ever wondered how to unlock your full potential and live your healthiest, most fulfilling life? Then this podcast is here to help you achieve just that. We dive deep into the world of health and performance, exploring how to move better, feel better, and live a healthier, more fulfilling life. I chat with inspiring coaches, athletes, health experts, and high performers from all walks of life to learn from their stories, mindsets, and lifestyle choices. Whether you're an experienced high performer or new to the world of health and well-being, I'm in your corner to guide you on the path to being the healthiest, happiest, and highest performing version of yourself. Let's go. Yo, welcome back to Kinsei-Do Corner. I've got my regular guest Lucas on today again, and it's going to be a great. Hey Lucas, it's going to be a great episode because, the fellow or the long-term listeners will remember this, that a couple of months ago I had Coach Ryan and I on this show, and I recorded an episode with him which I thought would be the start of a series around training and programming for training, whereby my idea was that every episode we would focus on a particular aspect of training. So in that episode with Coach Ryan, I talked about, or rather he talked about, programming and training for strength. And that was a great episode, and I would highly recommend that you go back and listen to it, everyone out there. But then for several reasons we didn't manage to do more episodes. And now I have the great fortune of having Lucas, and I'm going to say an equally awesome coach. Both of them obviously absolute studs. So I've got Coach Lucas on today, and he's gonna help me to dissect training for endurance in the similar vein as what I did with Ryan a couple of months back. So welcome, Lucas, and thanks for coming on again.
Yeah, hey mate, always good to be coming onto the show and having a chat with you. I love it. It's becoming a more and more regular thing, so that's cool. I like it.
Yeah. That is awesome. It is awesome. We say that every time you come on the show, we say, oh, we could talk for hours. We could dissect this and this and this, and it's true. Sure. And here we are. Here we are.
At it again. Yeah. No,
back
good
at
to be
it
here,
again.
man. And yeah, absolutely. Ryan is a great person to chat to about strength. I mean, that boy is one of the strongest people I know, so it's a very suitable topic for him. Hopefully I can do the same with the endurance side of things.
For sure. Also one of the fittest, by the way. I mean, obviously the CrossFit Open was just concluded, and he absolutely smashed it again.
Yeah, we were always, every day, every Friday morning, I'm like chatting to him, what's the strategy? What are you doing? How are we going to break this down? It was fun. Always good.
Okay. How did, maybe just a small detour before we jump into endurance training. How did the Open go for you? Obviously we did have a chat on this podcast about one of the Open workouts a couple of weeks back. So right. How did it go for you from there?
The Open was fun this year. I really enjoyed the workouts. I almost said I haven't done the last one, but I'm in another competition that took the first scores of the Open, and then they're adding one more workout. So I've still got technically one more in my CrossFit-y season, I guess you could say. But no, I really enjoyed the Open this year. Scored okay. I'm pretty happy with some of my results. Some I definitely could have done better, but overall I had a really good Open this year.
Lovely. Perfect. I guess I've been looking at your progress since you kind of left Indonesia, and obviously you've taken it to another level. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I feel like I have to.
This Open was, I think, looking at the workouts, I think it was pretty good for people who train regularly and seriously. I mean, the movements were I would say well chosen and fairly balanced, and it did have something for everyone, right? It had a lot of pull-ups for those that like that kind of thing. It had quite a few touches on the barbell. Was good.
Yeah, I hope I never see 25.3 again, though. I'll be very happy if that just disappears from life altogether. That was that second row was one of the hardest things I think I've ever done. It was so brutal.
It was for sure a tough one. I mean, 50, and I haven't actually done the conversion, but 50 calories is probably just under 1K, maybe 800 meters. So it's a
Yeah, right.
is a rough one. I guess obviously it also depends on how hard you're pulling, but no, it was rough. It was rough, and I did the scaled version of it, so the weights were manageable for me. I could do decent sets, especially the deadlifts and the cleans. Once I came to the snatches, it didn't quite go down to singles, but it did. Yeah, I needed a lot of rest. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, but you've got longer limbs, so I guess that row wouldn't have been too terrible for you, maybe, or
The
I don't
ro-
know.
the row was fine, and I mean, again, I didn't. There isn't anything riding on this for me. So let's say I'm not saying I didn't go hard. I did go pretty hard on the last row, but I didn't sell my soul. So I wasn't like on the floor for 20 minutes afterwards.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So maybe I could have etched out 5 more seconds, but it would have resulted in 20 minutes of nothing
Pure,
afterwards. So
pure sadness. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Oh, that
yeah.
makes sense. Yeah, cool, man. But
So that was
yeah,
good.
look, I'm happy to get into this and chat a little
Cool.
bit
Yeah.
about it.
Yes, for sure, for sure. So yeah, let me kind of preface that with just just mentioning what we had looked at, or how I had approached this when I was talking to Ryan about this. So I would love to kind of get your take, or your view on training for endurance. What are the general considerations? What kind of parameters do you consider, do you take into account as you approach the programming for this objective, the objective of improving your endurance, and perhaps being a better runner, or obviously in the last couple of months to a year, Hyrox has has imploded or exploded on the scene. So a lot of people will be listening to this because they would like to do a Hyrox race, or one or more. And as much as there are strength components to a Hyrox, it's mostly endurance.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And so yeah, so we kind of approach it from that kind of viewpoint. What do you consider? What do you think about when you program, let's say, a 12-week endurance block for someone, be yourself or one of your athletes, one of your clients? Yeah, I'll let you take it from
Yeah,
there.
yeah, cool. Yeah, sweet. Yeah, it's a great question. So many, I mean, we could spend forever talking about just this one thing. But for me, I think when it comes to, say, programming around endurance and things like, say, in prep for a Hyrox, kind of thinking about three main domains. So the first thing would just be around like energy system development and things in that regard. So it really just need to build that solid base. I think so having a solid aerobic base is obviously the key in something like Hyrox. That's pretty much where it's won. And then glycolytic capacity as well. Um, so basically, just that aerobic system is your efficiency engine. So we want to just become more efficient with that. And then that glycolytic system is like your performance engine. So if you neglect either of them, you're kind of screwed, right? So you want to be able to be training both of them at the same time. Um, I think after that, you'd be wanting to look around some things about movement efficiency as well. So like being more proficient under fatigue, I think is something that we want to get good at as well. Um, I mean, having a massive engine is good, but I mean, if you're just constantly leaking out through poor movement and things like that, you're going to have no near the same amount of output. So I think these are some pretty key things. Um, I guess talking a little bit more about that, like aerobic base building, which I think is pretty important, and then I guess talking about how you would program that over like a training block. I think you would want to be looking at spending as much time as you can in zone two. I think zone two is kind of where, especially like say a CrossFit athlete, they don't really spend a whole lot of time in zone two unless they're specifically doing it outside of classes. So I think just spending more time in that zone two, area. So I think you'd be looking at maybe putting like 2 or 3 sessions a week into some zone two work, maybe starting around that like 20 to 30 minute time domain, and then ideally maybe over that block, building that up to say 40 to 60 minutes. I think that's a really good way to start. In that kind of area, you're thinking about a heart rate of say like 60 to 70% of your heart rate max, or just like the talk test as well. So you could just think like, if I'm able to have a conversation, I'm probably in the right zone. If I'm unable to, sing a song or have a chat with the person running next to me, I'm probably not in that zone two area. Yeah, so I think that's kind of one thing. What else? Maybe say talking a little bit about that lactate threshold development as well. So like once you do have that solid base, how do we then progress on from there? So I think, once you've got that solid foundation, you need to develop a little bit of that ability, or you need to develop some lactate threshold. So the point where the lactate starts to kind of accumulate, and that's where it's starting to accumulate faster than you can clear it. I think once you get into that kind of training domain, that's where you start doing things like intervals and things like that. So that would maybe be that second phase of that training program. So you just be looking at being able to try and accumulate it and then clear it, and then accumulate it and then clear it. And you'd be doing that, like I said, through interval training. Maybe something like, what would be a good example? Something like 4 to 6 rounds, maybe say 4 to 5 minutes of effort, 80 to 85% heart rate, and then throw in maybe 1-to-1 work-rest ratio, right? So if you're resting 4 minutes, if you're working 4 minutes, you could then rest 4 minutes, and then do say 4 or 5 rounds of that. And then in that phase, maybe each week that you go through there, you would either look at, increasing that run distance, or even just reducing that rest time just to make it more challenging.
Sweet, perfect. I mean, lots of good stuff there already that we can dig into. And
sure.
As
sorry, I just went off on a tangent again.
No, not a problem at all. I just want to kind of make sure that listeners who maybe are not so familiar with all these terms that they can follow along. So firstly, you talked about two systems, aerobic and anaerobic. In the conjunction with the aerobic, you mentioned zone 2, which I know it's a bit of a buzzword around our community, let's say the coaches and people who spend a lot of time in the gym, but people who maybe not so much. So maybe you can take a step back and kind of talk a little bit more about what is zone 2, as in why is it what is 2, what is 1, what is 3, and so on, and then what does that, like, how does that fit into the discussion around, are we training aerobic or anaerobic?
Yeah, sure. So I think zone 2 is basically, we've got different zones, right? So zone 1 would be basically just doing absolutely nothing, sitting here like this. I think we go up, so it depends on which one, but we go to zone 5, maybe even zone 6. But zone 2 is just kind of that moderate intensity training, around typically 60 to 70% of your heart rate maximum. So this zone is where you can sustain exercise for long durations. So in the context of, say, like Hyrox, we're spending a lot of the entire event running, right? So, and it's not a short run. I mean, a 1K run is anywhere between 4 to 6 minutes, depending on how good you are at running. So being able to spend more time in that zone 2, it's just going to improve your overall aerobic capacity. And I think that's just why this kind of training and spending more time in this zone is really important, because that's how we start to build that endurance base, I think.
And maybe a bit of a question came to my mind as you were talking about this. So I like 1K split times, 4 to 6 minutes. I agree that probably that is like the range that most people that are, let's say, like us, that are looking at it, maybe let's say at the top end, maybe we come to 6.5 minutes, maybe even 7, depending on how, like, especially as the race goes on. But certainly, obviously, the world elite, they run faster split times than 4K,
sure.
4 minutes. Sure. But that's probably not us. How much so do you think, or how much do you believe the running portions should be aerobic, an aerobic effort in the race itself. Um,
Oh, it's a
do you know
good.
do you know
That's
what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Well, I mean, it's different on. I mean, on the day, your goal is to get the best possible time you can. So I think you're going to be um, struggling to keep it in that aerobic kind of base. I think it would definitely be maybe. I mean, coming out of some of those stations, your heart rate's going to be jacked, right? You're going to be up at 170, 190 maybe, depending on how hard you're working through those stations. So it's going to be really, really hard. That first little portion of the run, you're going to be going from a jacked heart rate, trying to drop it. So I think it's very hard for you in the actual training day, or sorry, the comp day, to stay in a zone two. But that being said, your goal would be to come out of that station, try and get that heart rate down as low as you possibly can before you come round to the next station again. That's how I would be looking at thinking about it. I think. What are your thoughts on that? Would you agree
Yeah,
similar?
yeah. I mean, I don't I haven't done a race, so I can't speak from how it feels myself. What I do know is that whenever I do workouts that include running, I'm talking like typical CrossFit workouts, usually maybe 300 meter or 3 to 400 meter runs. I often come out of the running with the highest heart rate. Like my heart rate, it kind of, and I don't know if that's because I have a poor aerobic base. It might be. It might also just be that my running efficiency, my running economy is very poor, and as such, I tax the system much more when I run than when I do burpees for let's say. But but yeah, so for me, that's why I was wondering, because I suspect that when I do a race, some of the stations, let's say the ski, the row, those will be the stations where I get my heart rate to come down a bit, and then the run will be more the opposite.
The opposite, yeah, right. But again, I think in terms of training and how training can carry over and make you better on race day, that kind of that lactate threshold training. I mean, that's where we're teaching the body to process lactate more efficiently, and then so that way you can push that threshold higher, right? So you can hold on for longer at at that kind of like lactate burning kind of sensation, or even that onset of that feeling is prolonged or delayed a little bit. So, I mean, that's what that training portion or programming portion is all about, I think.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so you mentioned spending or making sure you build up a strong foundation. I was I was actually just talking to a runner earlier today, and he mentioned that he's following a kind of an 80-20 rule, in the sense that 80% of all his runs are zone 2. They are really easy runs. Sometimes long, sometimes also not, right? Sometimes just a 5K, but easy. And then only 20% are maybe pushing it. And I didn't get to talk to him about whether this is particular to the current training phase he's in and whether that split will change. But I do remember having seen something like a similar comparison with elite athletes, where they basically say they spend two-thirds or more of their time in low gear, in moderate training, and only a small percentage of the time is actually spent at high intensity training, which is kind of exactly the opposite of what the weekend warriors do, right? we only spend 2 or 3 hours a week training. Sorry, I say we, but people who don't train professionally, they want to get the most out of it. They go in super hard for the 2 times 20 minutes that they train, and it's kind of, it doesn't have the effect that it should have.
Yeah, totally. I think too, like, what is your training base? Like, are they, if it's, if you're doing something that's more than, say, just running, right? So, like, you're a CrossFitter that might be training for a Hyrox event. I think for you, again, it depends what your strengths and weaknesses are, but like, it's hard for you to put 80% of your effort into just doing zone 2 runs when you've got all these other things to hit. So I think something that would be good is like, let's just say, well, for me, I'll just take me for example. When I was leading into my to my last Hyrox race, all I was doing was I would just do the classes like I would normally do 5 days a week. I would chuck in one zone 2 bike piece that I would do once a week, and then on Sundays I would just do more of a Hyrox focused session. So really, in leading up to the Hyrox event, I really only just added one additional session to my overall weekly program, and that was still a very CrossFit style workout, but with longer runs in it, or movements that are more that would be kind of in the Hyrox, so more sled pushes, sled pulls, farmers carries, burpee, broad jumps, and things like that. Essentially, I just do like a Hyrox workout on Sunday. So yeah, in that sense, I think it's hard for you to do an 80-20, but I definitely think that sticking with your regular programming and chucking in 2 zone 2 sessions a week is probably going to get you a pretty great amount of the way there for you to get a good score on the day.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's good to hear because, yeah, obviously, time constraints are such are a real thing, right? It's a major concern.
Especially for people who aren't doing this full time as a professional.
Correct. So time constraint or the limited availability, the limited amount of time that they have, and then if you're thinking, I mean, especially the thing with zone 2 training is it's not efficient, right? You have to spend a long time.
It takes a while.
You can't do a 10-minute zone 2. Well, you can, but it doesn't do much for you.
No, it doesn't do much for the.
So you got to spend like you said, 30 minutes and up, right? And building up to 60 or even, I mean, depending on what your sport is, maybe if you're trying to run a marathon, you got to get up to those durations at some point. And it's just not very efficient, and that often then leads to people either neglecting the other things or in the long run just neglecting the zone 2 again and coming back to the fun stuff, so to say.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's I mean, you just started earlier just now, but let's get a bit more practical So let's say a 12-week block. Think of maybe someone like me, if you were coaching me, or basically someone working 9 to 5, working a full-time job, have about an hour a day to train. How would you approach the programming? What would you say? Look, you've got 12 weeks. Let's say 12 weeks to a Hyrox. So 12 weeks. How much time do I spend zone 2 for how many weeks? How does the transition to a more anaerobic interval-based training look like over that time? Let's just get really practical.
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. I think how would we do it? So I think maybe say for the first maybe, sorry, was it 12 weeks? Yeah, let's say 12 weeks. So let's say the first 4 weeks, we're looking at starting on maybe implementing 2 sessions a week of zone 2 movement. And I think if we're doing it in prep for Hyrox, it shouldn't be swimming or something like that. It should be something that we're doing that would carry over to the sport. So run, row, or ski. I think even maybe say a bike erg would be good too.
Sorry to jump in, but that's a good point, because I mean, obviously we are now talking about Hyrox, but for people just listening and taking this away, it can be swimming, right? Swimming is great.
Definitely
could be brisk walking if that's your thing. Zone 2.
Anything that gets you up into that heart rate and sticks you there. I think in that first week we'd be looking at getting, say, comfortable at the not the first week, over the first, say, couple of weeks, we want to get to a point where we can hold 30 minutes comfortably in that zone 2 phase the entire time without dipping in and out. I think just holding a consistent 30 minutes there. And then maybe, say, in that second phase, we still want to continue doing aerobic base the whole time. Zone 2 the whole time. But I think maybe in that, say, second phase there, we'd be looking at bumping that up to, say, trying to get to 45 minutes with the goal to be trying to get towards maybe say even an hour over the 12-week program. And then once you're in that second phase, moving into the third phase, you probably take out say one of those zone 2 training sessions and then implement an interval style session there as well. So when we're in that phase 2, when we start doing interval training, I'd be looking at doing one of those a week. And then if you're still looking at doing regular training outside of just zone stuff, and then I would say maybe try and train 3 CrossFit sessions a week or some kind of functional training, and then have the training kind of be in at least loosely consistent with what's going to be coming up in the Hyrox itself. So I'd say doing a lot more like strongman style things where you're doing some grip strength, so farmers carries, sandbag carries, things like that, sandbag lunges, walking lunges. I think still you can never shy too far away from Old Faithful squat and deadlift. I think they will always come over pretty well. And then, if you have pull-ups, maybe implementing some pull-ups to help with the pulling on the sled pull. And then, if you're someone that hasn't quite got their pull-up strength yet there to achieve a full pull-up, maybe you could do something like a bent over row, something that, allows you to pull some solid weight while you're able to, do the other stuff as well.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that makes total sense. So kind of, so two or three endurance focused. I mean, obviously, endurance is the focus of this episode. So 2 or 3
Sure.
endurance focused sessions per week throughout your 12 weeks. Keeping 2 to 3 non-endurance focused, so regular CrossFit or functional fitness, F45, whatever your thing is, keeping that as well. Now, obviously, you get a bit of an endurance component with that as well.
Sure.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
You'll definitely get some fitness gain from that as well. 100%.
So you'll have that, and then throughout your 12 weeks, you go from focusing only on zone 2 towards the end. You still continue a bit of zone 2, but you also go into the interval stuff to work that lactate threshold. Perfect.
Yeah,
that sounds very, 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 very sound.
Yeah, I think so too. And then I think maybe say towards the very end of the programming, like let's say we call it a 12-week block, but we actually bump that out to say 13 weeks with like 1 week maybe on the backside to maybe try and like replicate a bit more in that Hyrox style, like almost like simulating a race. Maybe on that 13th week, you could still continue your strength and conditioning side of things, and then maybe take out the zone 2 for that week, and then what you were maybe say on your Sunday of that week, maybe just run through a full Hyrox or do like an 800-meter Hyrox, something like that to give you a taste of what it would really feel like once you've put it all together in this kind of training setting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously keeping a couple of days before the actual event, just so you can also recover, because those things, especially if you think you're gonna do a full simulation, there's gonna be upwards of 80 minutes for most people. So that's a very long and very hard workout. Cool. That's good. Just kind of also just I think we've got a great base. We got a lot of good practical tips here that people can implement. So I do want to wrap up on some practical things, but just maybe, does what you just said, does that change if we are now not talking about Hyrox, but basically just someone who wants to run a 10K, run a half marathon? Same, different? How would you look at the programming for that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it still is relative to, a runner trying to get better at running. I mean, by no means am I here to give marathon advice. I think the longest I've ever run is 8K. So I'm not a whiz on that kind of training, but I definitely think like you want to have some form of progressive overload in the way that you train. I think you want to start by building a base, whatever that looks like for the thing that you're trying to get better at. So find that base. Once you've found that base, try and increase the intensity of that thing, and then do it in a setting where you ramp the intensity up and give yourself time to recover, and do that for repeats. And then over that phase, you either want to increase the intensity, increase the distance, reduce the rest time and recovery time, something that's going to challenge you and make that that lactate threshold training really, really beneficial for you. And then I think at the end of that, once you've gotten through those two phases, then the end phase would be just to try and stimulate the thing that you're doing, and then set yourself a goal, and then hopefully through the training that you've been doing, smash that goal. That's kind of the way I would look at it.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so I mean, yes, running is obviously a different sport than any functional fitness. Even a functional fitness that is heavy on running, like Hyrox, it's going to be different than if you were training for just running. I say just running not as a not to mean disrespect to running, but just it's a different sport.
Like just specifically running, yeah. Solely running, yeah, sure.
So you need a different adaptation when you're running, and you don't need to be as strong as when you're doing a Hyrox. So maybe you actually want to be a bit lighter rather than a specific type of athlete that will do well in Hyrox. But it's still the principles that you've mentioned still apply, where we need the strong zone 2, we need the strong base, the strong aerobic base, and from that you can build onto that. The other thing you just mentioned, which is I think interesting and not to be overlooked, is time, or let's say duration of your training isn't the only variable you can play with.
Yeah, 100%.
Obviously there's speed, right? You can run faster.
Yeah.
But there's also rest periods. There's different variables that you can play with to make your training to change the adaptation of your training. So if
absolutely.
If for whatever reason, and that's probably quite practical, that if you are someone with a job and with other commitments, the amount of time that you have available to train doesn't increase, although your stimulus needs to change as you go along, right? But you still only have that 1 hour. So how do I change the stimulus within that hour? And things like obviously running faster is one way, taking less breaks, running up hills, right? You can do that,
running
and
in
it's
a different terrain. Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways you can do it. Absolutely.
Cool. Well, I think that was really, really good, and I'm excited to kind of take it away and see if I can implement what you've now talked about. I do find zone 2 training is specifically good for me on days when I, not to say overdid it, but on days when I, let's say, trained hard the day before, and I'm feeling too sore and I look at the program, I look at what I should be doing, and I'm like, not today. And then I just hop on a bike and do 30 minutes at 130 to 140 heart rate, and I feel good. I feel like I've done something, and it's actually helped my endurance as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And too, like sometimes you'll come in after, say, like a heavy squatting day, your legs are pretty heavy, you're not feeling it, you're just like, oh man, I've got squat cleans today, there's no chance. So yeah, sitting on the bike for 30 minutes, flushing out the legs a little bit, is good by its own right. But also sometimes I found after a bike ride, my legs are feeling pretty good again. I've got the I've got the blood flowing, and then I can then come in and hit that session that I didn't really want to do.
Oh, that's
prior.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I've never done that. When I have chickened out, so to say, and when I've done the bike ride, then that was my session. I'm not then doing the other session.
I'm not only doing the other one. I did it today. Went to the gym with Miranda, I got on the phone to my brother, so I got kind of sidetracked. And then by the time I came into the gym, I just ended up just basically being Miranda's PT today and just running her through a workout. And I was just like stretching here and there, and ended up not doing anything. But Anyway.
No, but anyway, those are all as we now talked about, all of those sessions have value, right? Even
Definitely, man.
a zone 2 that you think is only for recovery or whatever you tell yourself, because you aren't hitting it as hard as you normally do. They all have value, so that's
But
perfect.
yeah, I mean, I really think like taking it away just from the Hyrox for a second, like the one thing that I really think like a CrossFitter who you know is really strong that always hits a wall in the middle of a workout, what's the best thing that they could do? 2 sessions of zone 2 a week on top of
Mm.
their training. I really think like after like 6 to 12 weeks of doing that, their engine, their ability to just like, hold on for longer and hurt later in a workout becomes really clear. Clear.
Oh, that's okay. That's really good because that is also it's a new way for me to looking at it, because typically I've always thought of strength as my biggest limitation in terms of CrossFit workouts. So I'm just not strong enough to move the bigger weights, either at all or at the volume, at the number of reps that's required. But actually, yes, strength is missing, but maybe it's also my aerobic base. If it was stronger, if it was better, I could at least go into the workout a bit deeper into the workout, so to say.
Yeah, a bit deeper. I mean, like you're probably still gonna hurt. Like it doesn't mean that you're just magically never gonna hurt again. Like it just means your hurt, is 3 minutes into a workout rather than 1 minute into a workout or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
It's still coming, though.
Perfect. Yeah.
It's still coming.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's good thinking about it. Okay. Well,
Yeah,
thank you,
cool.
Lucas. This was very, very good, very insightful. I think people who want to look at Hyrox, but also just people who want to look at running or maybe triathlon will have something to take away from this. And it's been super helpful. And thank you
Yeah,
again
man.
for sharing all your
Always a
wisdom.
pleasure, mate. I love catching up and sharing a little bit of my knowledge to your audience. And yeah, I'm glad to always be here, man.
Fantastic. Thank you.
See you later, mate.